Before we get started, Heidi mentioned that we were going to have like some hope shared throughout the day, and that wasn't her role. That's mine. That's why there's a Bible up here with me. And before we jump into that, I just want to recognize like the amount of information we just took in. So if you're cool with it, we're going to start with just like taking a deep breath and like try to come back to a baseline, okay? So if you're cool with it, I'm not going to do a bunch of weirdo breathing stuff with you, but we're working on your nervous system, okay? So you're going to breathe in through your nose, hold it, and then you're going to breathe out through your mouth. Just going to do it twice, and then I'll go back to regular presentation stuff. Okay, ready? We're going to go in. Try to exhale longer than you inhale. Those are like the brakes of your nervous system. We're going to do it one more time. It's fine if you end up yawning. In. Does that feel better? Yeah. There's a balance to this stuff. There's a practical side, and there's a spiritual side. We see it in Isaiah 61, where you're not only called to set the captives free who are captive in the natural and the physical, but what does that look like to offer them freedom in the spiritual? Value Unconditional helps people heal from and better understand trauma, and that is not limited to sexual exploitation and sex trafficking. The two most common traumas that we work with are adult survivors of child abuse and neglect, and then sexual violence. Sex trafficking and sexual exploitation is under that category of sexual violence. Restorative care, that might be individual services, group support, education. How do we equip the community to not only understand what trauma looks like, but how to respond in those situations? How do you prevent it? And then advocacy, and that's that work that we do with hospitals and law enforcement specific to sexual exploitation, sextortion, and sex trafficking. Heidi is actually on our education team at Value Unconditional as well. Yeah, she's awesome. She's awesome. She does a great job at giving you the reality without sugarcoating anything, because you need to know what it actually looks like. But the other thing that's important to keep in mind, I'm going to start with a question on this, is what healing even looks like. Now, we're not going to judge each other when I ask this question. We're just going to be honest. You're going to look internally, forget what anyone else is doing. At any point during that presentation, was there a part of your mind or your heart that went, oh gosh, what hope is there? How do they heal? They're never going to recover from this. If anything like that crossed your mind during this, flash a palm at me. Give me a... We have like 8 honest people in the room. That's amazing. That's fantastic. What does it look like to not think the darkness is too much? What do you have to know inside to not be overwhelmed by the dark? Yeah. Book of John. The light shines in the darkness has not overcome it. So how do we keep hold of that? How is that the anchor when we see 200% increase in child sexual exploitation online in the last 2 years? How do we keep anchored when it's 105,000 men in Kansas City just during the time of this were actively seeking sex? And how many of them were seeking sex with a child? How do we stay anchored in that when we know that research shows us over 50% of pastors struggle with porn addiction? How do you stay anchored? We'll tell you one of the best ways to stay anchored is to make sure that there's not anything in between you and the anchor. If your hope is in your pastor, you're going to fall down. If your hope is in anything other than directly being connected to that source of truth and light and freedom, you're going to feel let down every time. When your pastor falls, should it break your heart? Yes. But should it disconnect you from Jesus? No. It just reveals that maybe our trust was kind of in some sort of middleman. And then we get to look in and be like, Jesus, I didn't realize I was doing that. I'm sorry. Thanks for revealing that to me so that I can go directly to the source, because I have that access because you died and then rose. I don't need someone else to enter the Holy of Holies for me. I get to go in and be in his presence. So what does that look like to stay anchored to that when faced with something as horrific and traumatic as sexual exploitation? That's happening right now while we're in this room. It's happening right now. Within 5 minutes of here? Yeah, probably. Yeah. One of the worst trafficking cases I've seen was this week. This week. And I'll tell you, it was more important than ever to be reminded of where the anchor is. I'm passionate about this because good intentions are not enough to help people feel restored. Good intentions aren't enough to not cause harm. On the education side, we help teach people what to do with your face and what to do with your hands, what's okay to say, what do we never say when we're supporting somebody who's hurting. Not just hurting from sexual trauma, but somebody comes to you and tells you they had a miscarriage. What do you do with your face? What do you do with your hands? What's okay to say? What are we never going to say? Somebody tells you they just found out their spouse has an online relationship. They have a sexual addiction. Whatever they're sharing with you, how can your response look anchored without seeming high and mighty? What does it look like to hold space for all the hard things without making this person feel like we're saying, oh, I really need you to hurry up and heal because this is getting really uncomfortable for me. But we do that to people. They try to share the hard stuff and we kind of silence them oh, okay, we're going to talk about something different now. Why are you intimidated of the dark if you know the light? Why does this intimidate you? What would it look like to be so well acquainted with the source of light that no matter what hard thing we're faced with, it's oh, I know a guy who can light this up. Oh, this isn't going to be too much for him. So when a victim looks into my eyes, they should never see that I'm thinking, oh man, they're never going to be able to heal from this. When they look into my eyes, they need to see hope because I know the one who is capable of restoring and redeeming any broken thing. Isaiah 61, verse 7. Instead of your shame, you will receive a double portion. When they look in my eyes, do they think that I think that? Or do they look at my eyes and think, man, this is really bad. It is really bad. And you know what? I still know a guy. Not too much for him. Do they look at your eyes and see hope? Continuing that verse, Isaiah 61, verse 7, and instead of disgrace, you will rejoice in your inheritance. I don't say this as somebody who's not seen the dark. With our work, have the honor of seeing it every day. And so you will inherit a double portion in your land, and everlasting joy will be yours. I'm not saying this to you as somebody who hasn't seen the dark. There are a couple things that are really important when we consider harm of any kind. If we're talking about sexual exploitation, if we're talking about food allergies and anaphylaxis, okay, harm of any kind, there's some important things. Prevention. If we're talking food allergies, the best way to prevent anaphylaxis is to avoid exposure. We don't want them to be exposed to whatever food they are allergic to. But let's say they are exposed. Amen, Joy Marie. Shellfish allergy, keep it away from her. What if they are exposed to this harm? Maybe it's a food allergy. Maybe it's the heavy stuff Heidi talked to us about today. What's the second most important thing? Treat. How do you know what to treat? You have to recognize it. So we want to try to prevent it. If we can't prevent it and they're exposed anyway, we want to recognize it. Right now, a gigantic hole in supporting victims of sex trafficking is people are not identifying it. 87% of sex trafficking victims say that they receive some sort of medical help while actively in the life, and yet 6% are identified and offered appropriate resources. 6. Because we don't know what it actually looks like, and that's why Heidi's trainings, Paradigm Shift Training and Consulting, is so valuable, because it shows you the truth. We want to try to prevent it. When we can't, man, we got to make sure we recognize it. And then after we recognize it, that's when you respond appropriately. I'm not just going to walk up to somebody and jab them with epinephrine. I got to recognize that they actually need the epinephrine, right? Bringing that back into a sex trafficking dynamic, how do I even know what healing or support is available if I don't know that this person has that need? And what does that support actually look like? There's several different types of support, and all of them are really important and really valuable. There's victim advocates, value unconditional. On the sex trafficking side, that is what our team would be known for, would be victim advocacy when it comes to sexual exploitation. Victim advocates may or may not be survivors. Number one rule of victim advocacy, it's not about you. You provide emotional support. You provide resources. We're activated by hospitals. We show up in the emergency room and we get to chat with the patient who might be going through all sorts of stuff. And what I want to know as a victim advocate responding, what is most important to you right now? I might think you need therapy, but I'm not the one who has to show up at therapy and relive all those hard things that you're going to have to talk about. Is it fair for me to say, well, you should really consider therapy? Should is shamey. It's not helpful. Even if therapy may be valuable, if the number one rule of advocacy is that it's not about you, how do you know that's what is most important to them? What's most important to them? Victim advocates are going to do that emotional support, and they're going to provide resources. Then you have peer support. Peer support is typically someone who the victim knows has also had that same lived experience. It is open. You see it a lot in substance use recovery. There's peer support models where maybe you're 3 days sober and you get connected with somebody who's 3 years sober. Maybe they know something that you don't know. And you might be more likely to trust them because you believe that you two have walked some sort of the same path, even if the substance is actually different. Peer support, victim advocacy, then you might have more of those clinical spaces. You have a therapist, psychiatrist. We also have mentors on our side. A mentor may or may not be a survivor. But with victim advocacy, where we do not disclose whether or not we've had that same experience, in mentoring, it's not a priority. But at some point, as that relationship is established, it might come out. It might be shared a couple months in when it's relevant to something they're asking about. But why do you think it's so harmful in attempting to support somebody in their healing to let them know that you are also a survivor? Why? Somebody discloses to you, something real bad happened to me. I was abused when I was XYZ age. Me too. How does that change the conversation? Now, I am not positioned to only provide support. Now, there might be a part of them that's like, oh man, now I feel bad for you. Are they going to be as open with the information that's being shared? When it comes to sexual violence, absolutely not recommended to self-disclose when somebody is making a disclosure to you. That is why victim advocacy comes before peer support. Because it's not about you, it's about them. It's about meeting them where they are. It's about identifying what is important to them. How are they going to trust you to make recommendations when there's no relationship? When you're suggesting things and they're like, no, actually, that doesn't apply to me. You're suggesting epinephrine and they're like, actually, I have a cream that I put on my skin rash. I don't feel like you understand what I'm saying. If you're making recommendations based on things that you think you understand, but I don't feel like you do. When it comes to the restorative side, when it comes to supporting a victim who has experienced some sort of trauma, we have to be willing to consider that they know more about the situation than we do. We've seen the tippy, tippy, tip of the iceberg. And as they feel safe, giving us a little bit of information, see how you handle it. Kind of hokey pokey. I'm going to give you a little bit more information, see how you do with that. Hey, you did okay. You haven't panicked yet. I still see hope in your eyes. Maybe this isn't too much for you. I'm going to give you a little bit more. And before you know it, I'm sharing all this information because you have made that person feel safe. You can build that relationship. I won't get into all the things with attachment trauma. Any foster parents in here? Okay. Something that can sometimes happen with attachment trauma is when somebody feels safe, they start pushing you away. That's a whole other part of the puzzle. We only have 30 minutes, so instead of going into all the training about restoration, I want to talk to you about the heart posture that's necessary to support someone through this healing. The book of John, verse 11. There's this dude named Lazarus, and he died. He's been dead for a couple days. People are very sad about that. Then Jesus shows up. This is good. We're going to look really through verse 38 through 44. But the biggest emphasis is going to be on 44. So long story short, Jesus tells them to roll the stone away, right? Verse 41, so they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And now, do not miss this. Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. We're going to do this again. Jesus calls out Lazarus, raises him from the dead. He comes out in linens. Jesus doesn't walk up and start untying him, and there's cultural context for this. But what do we learn from this? There's a bunch of people there, and Jesus looks at them. You unwrap him. Get your hands dirty. Don't be afraid of the mess, of the stinky. If it's not too much for him, he didn't ask you to do that part here. He did his part. He said, Lazarus, come out. And then he called on the people that were there. This is a partnership. Whether it's a sex trafficking victim, whether it's Lazarus being raised from the dead, whether it's survivors of child abuse, whether it's somebody overcoming eating disorders, whether it's somebody who's grieving the loss of a parent, approaching Mother's Day. Jesus is going to do his part. What's yours? Don't be intimidated by the mess. Don't be intimidated by the dark. Sometimes that's easier said than done. The easiest way to do that is make sure you're anchored to the light. Keep your nose buried in this book. You will not be able to help but have hope. As you are reading through this book, story after story after story of impossible things happening. So then when you're met with a situation that seems impossible because she's been abused for 20 years, she's been abused her whole life, he's been abused, he thinks, whatever. Will it shake you? Not so easily. I'm going to share something heavy that I actually don't typically share, but it's on my heart, so I'm just going to trust that the Lord has a reason for it. He's cool at meeting people where they are, you know? When I was 18, I was playing volleyball on the opposite side of the country, only child, no family in that state, but I got a volleyball scholarship, so you're not going to not go, right? First semester of my freshman year in college, I was drugged and raped on a date. This is someone that on paper, you would introduce to your parents. They're a family man, obsessed with his little sisters, taking over the family business, successful, good-looking, believer. Second date, he drugged and raped me. For the next 4 years, I'm going to say a bad word, it's mental prep. For the next 4 years, I received text messages. Hey, my little slut, when are you going to let me make another video of you? Hey, baby, when are you going to let me take more pictures of you? Who do you tell? I didn't want to tell my coach because the person who hooked me up on the date with this person was on my volleyball team. I'm a freshman. You don't want to be a freshman starting drama. That's like rule number 1 of college athletics. Didn't want to tell my parents I was living on the opposite side of the country. I didn't want to leave my school. He didn't even go to my school. I worked hard for this. I'm not leaving. Who do you tell? I ended up working with a free counselor because that's what was available. You know, the advice I was given is that rape is bad, but like, you have sex on a pedestal. What's going to help you is by taking your yes back. You need to pick some good friends that you can have just some great casual sex with. Can you think of anyone who you might be able to have some casual sex with? This is not how I was raised. My mother, goodness gracious, don't even want to know how that would have gone down had she known that was the advice I was being given. But hey, you're the pro, right? You went to school for this, right? What do you do? I will tell you that when I went to the people who understood my trauma, they were so phenomenal at meeting me with the trauma, but they didn't understand my faith. And I'm going to tell you something that might sting a little bit, and I hope it does. Not to shame you for yesterday, but to help you do better for today and tomorrow. When I went to the faith-based people, they were so uninformed about my trauma, and it seemed like their faith was so unstable when met with something heavy and dark that they actually caused a lot of harm. I was kicked in the face more asking for help from my faith-based community than anywhere else I ever went. Why do I feel more supported in secular environments? I thought you know Jesus. I thought he has hope. I never questioned if God was real. I know he's real, and that's why I was so angry and bitter. What were you up to November 14, 2009? Where were you? And there was no space where it was safe to ask that question. It was, whoa, whoa, whoa. He put breath in your lungs this morning. Don't you be disrespectful. Honey, you play college volleyball. Don't you know those shorts give boys the wrong idea? You didn't really need to be on that date in the first place, right? I don't know. I mean, I'm 18, and on paper, dude seems like who you're supposed to date. I want to encourage you as a predominantly faith-based community, I assume, in this room. If Shelly's putting it on, you're probably faith-based, right? We believe in Jesus. I want to encourage you to not only not be intimidated of the dark, but you don't have to run from it either when somebody tries to share stuff with you. It's okay to offer space for that. It's not too much for him. If it's not too much for him, does it have to be too much for us? You don't have to do it in your own strength. You don't have to throw this person's on your back and be like, I gotcha. No, they're not yoked to you. His yoke is easy. Yours, maybe not, unless you're connected to him. Let's have him carry this. Let's have him do that. Not too much for him. May 14th, we are doing a training online. It's on the Value Unconditional website under events. I don't remember the time it is, but I'm conducting it. It is on what to do with your face, what to do with your hands, what is okay to say, what do we never say when we are supporting someone who's hurting. May 14th. I don't remember the exact time, but it's a 2-hour training. You do have to register. That's how you'll get the online link. Whether you do that training or you seek out training in another way, consider what it means as the faith-based person who someone might be turning to. It's a lift. But if you're the only Christian they've ever met, if you're the first Christian they've talked to in a long time, you're not just representing you, you're representing what faith-based responses look like. At Value Unconditional, we say that it's faith-based and trauma-capable because both really, really matter. I can't rush you into talking about faith if I'm not willing to meet you in the practical need, whatever that is. This book is full of all the hope you need to not be intimidated by the ugly, messy, deviant, hard things, even if they're your own. It's one thing to support other people. It's another thing to rush into supporting other people because you're avoiding healing. And I just want to encourage you and remind you and let you know, nudge you, that if you rush into serving before healing, your healing is going to interrupt your serving. If you're willing to believe it's not too much for them, would you dare to believe that it's not too much for you either? Your stuff is not too heavy for him. If this is enough to hope for them, would we give the Lord permission to operate in that same way in our own hearts? I thank you so much for the honor and privilege of being here today. I know you've got some phenomenal speakers and presenters lined up throughout the day. I'm Geony Rucker with Value Unconditional, and I'm going to hand it back to Leslie.